the few seconds that I know it always takes to actually kick in. Alrighty, okay, I think we're successfully recording. So, Dark Bleatings, everyone. I'm here with David Watkins today, author of numerous works that I'm a big fan of, including Werewolves in the original's Return and the Exeter Incident, which is actually kind of hard to describe. I would call it like a balls out action horror is probably how I would describe that one.
Yeah, I'll take that.
And other works, of course, but these are my two favourites. Welcome to the channel, David. How's it going?
It's very well, thank you. Nice to be here.
Cool. So, oh, sorry if you hear cats hissing in the background. I apologise. They've chosen now to fight. Excuse me. Thank you. Right. So sorry about that, everyone. So if we can start off with talking about some werewolves, that would be great.
Yep.
Because I am always complaining that there is a bit of a hole in books when it comes to werewolves. You can always find thousands of vampires, ghosts, and zombies, but werewolves and witches I find a bit harder to come by unless we're in the YA teen paranormal romance stuff, which is fine, but it's not my particular cup of tea. So, did you have a particular inspiration going into this, or did you start with werewolves and build a story around it?
Yeah, I started with werewolves. I don't know why. I've always really liked werewolves. I think it's probably because I saw American Werewolf in London at too young an age. Although compared to somebody like Kit, I'm really not that young. And I don't know. I was out in the woods with my wife and we're walking around and it just kind of popped into my head of what would happen if the ground gave way right now. Just random thoughts that authors get, I suppose. And we were just standing there, and she was looking at me, going, "What is wrong with you? You've kind of gone a bit nuts." And I was like, "Right, I'm going to write a werewolf book." And it came off the back of a couple of events. So I've always wanted to be a writer, and when I was 14, I was writing just really, really shocking high fantasy rip-offs of, Lord of the Rings and things like that. And they were just dreadful. But all the time I was reading Stephen King, James Herbert, people like that. And then I thought, well, why am I not writing a horror book? So when I was 18, I wrote a book set in New York. I'd never been to New York. I knew nothing about New York, but obviously, being a precocious 18-year-old knobhead, I decided that I was going to write a book about New York. And that actually is the first draft of Exeter Incident, but we'll come back to that. So fast forward, through university, I decided to become a teacher. I thought, I've got a 5-year plan. So this is 22-year-old me. I've got a 5-year plan. I'll be a teacher. I'll teach for 5 years. I'll write in all of that spare time that teachers have. The holidays, finishing at 3:30. I'll do all of that. And then within 5 years, I'll have a couple of books out, and then I'll be able to just be a writer. And then the reality of being a teacher hit. And so here we are 30 years later. I'm still teaching and I have a couple of books out. But I was driving to work one morning too fast because I was late, and basically lost control of the car, spun and collided with a lorry.
Oh, God.
It isn't an exaggeration to say that I am lucky to be alive. Basically, the only bit of the car that was left was my seat, and I got up and walked away. I got some scars, but I'm okay. More importantly, the driver of the truck was fine. Like my car was absolutely totaled. Her truck had lost a bumper, and I was lying in the hospital, being force-fed oxygen by a very caring nurse who was at the same time picking glass out of my wrist. It really, it was bad, right? But I walked away. Everybody walked away from the accident, which is a massive relief, because obviously it was entirely my fault. I was just driving like a dick, and as we all do, so that's it. So I'm lying in hospital. It turns out oxygen is a bit of an apper. So I turned the situation into quite a bad thing. That Christmas, so this was in January. This was something like January the 8th, something like that. And that Christmas, my brother had bought me On Writing by Stephen King. And he'd written in the front of it, I hope this gives you some inspiration, which is amazing of him, really. I need to give a massive shout out to my brother there, because he was the only one who would ever read anything I wrote when we were kids. And the poor bugger, like when I was 14, oh my God. So I owe him big time for that. And so as part of my recuperation, I was reading On Writing. And then I kind of went downstairs, saw my wife, and said, and we'd just had our youngest was just born at that point, Ethan. Josh was about 3. And I said, look, there's no kind of life before your eyes moment or anything like that. That doesn't happen. That's absolute bollocks. The only thing that went through my mind was, this is going to hurt. And I said, look, I really need to give this a go. I need to write a book. And she, much to her credit, said, yeah, okay then. We had a 5-month-old and a 3-year-old, and I was out working all day, and then I'd come home and lock myself in a room and write all night. And she let me do that, which, yeah, she's special, my wife. And I've got to say that, she's going to watch this later. So yeah, and I'd always had this idea of a werewolf from those horrific, early fantasy books. And Jack Stadler was in one of those books, and he was a werewolf who was in love with a vampire, and they were going across in all kinds of adventures across the fantasy realm. Honestly, Kelly, it was dreadful. So I changed it all and made it basically where we live. So we live in a small village in Devon, which has it's pretty much as it's described in the book. And the woods where Jack has his little accident is where I used to run every morning. So it just kind of rolled from there, really. And at the time, I had absolutely no clue what I was doing. So I made it up as I went, and then sorted it all out in edits afterwards, which meant it took about 4.5 years probably to write, because I wrote myself down blind alleys. I did things where you just go, well, there's no payoff for that plot line, let's get rid of that, and all of that kind of thing. So yeah, that's where it came from, really. That was a long answer, wasn't it?
No, that's good. That's good. People
okay,
like
good,
long
good.
answers. Yeah, I think it was Neil Gaiman said something like, you do the first draft to get the basic story down, and then in the second draft you start making it look like you knew what you were doing.
Yeah, I forget exact quotes, but it's basically, your first draft is for you and no one else. Don't make anyone suffer it, something like that, he said. And I agree with that.
Yeah.
I agree with that. My first drafts are shocking. So, but yeah.
Well, the setting and the locations, I really enjoyed, because they felt very real. I could see the house, I could see the woods, I could see.
Good. It's my house.
Yep. I haven't been stalking David. He just described it really well. Yeah, I was really happy to get this, because I'm forever complaining that I just can't find werewolf books. People say they're out there. There are some, but it's just, they're not in abundance like some other subgenres. And then, so American Werewolf in London, I think that's a big influence to everyone, really, who likes werewolves. Do you have other favorites?
The Thing. The Thing is just an incredible movie. But if you're talking about werewolves, damn it, Dog Soldiers.
Oh yeah.
Dog Soldiers. I can't remember if I'd seen Dog Soldiers when I started writing Originals Return. I probably did, because the military, the humor, all of that is very similar to Dog Soldiers, and that was very definitely not deliberate. I'm not trying to rip anyone off. But Dog Soldiers is another great film.
Yeah.
That seems. I mean, Janine Pike did some stuff to bring that back into everyone's collective consciousness, which is wonderful. But yeah, The Thing is probably my favorite film.
Yeah, it's so good. It's my top
I
three of all time.
I I my wife bought it for me for Christmas when we had a 4K television, and so we watched the 4K edition of it, which is a bit weird because it was in the 80s. I'm pretty sure they didn't film in 4K then, but anyway, in 4K it looked incredible. So she watched it with me, and the very next day I sat down with Ethan, my youngest, and we watched it together. And what was amazing is, that's what, 1980, 1981, something like that, that film was
Mm.
made. And there he is as an uber cool, 14-year-old sitting literally on the edge of our sofa with his head in his hands doing that blood scene,
Yeah.
the whole, that whole thing and how tense it is. And he was just like, oh my God, this is amazing. So brilliant. Well done, John Carpenter.
Yeah, it's such a good film. I've been showing my husband my favorite horror films, just in with big gaps in between. He's not a huge horror fan. So I
Yeah,
thought,
my
oh
wife hates it.
yeah, I thought, how do I convert him? I'll convert him with like the best films. Start with the really, really good ones, and then it's all downhill from there after I've got through that catalogue. But um, the Exeter incident, in my review, I think that I said that it's the feel of it to me is like kind of like Aliens, as it with like the action horror blend.
Yep.
And there's a lot of action in this one as well. Is that where your brain sort of like naturally goes? Because they're quite fast paced as well.
Yeah, I'm easily bored and easily distracted. So a friend of mine has recently been diagnosed with ADHD, and I don't think I am, but I need to keep my attention, and it turns out I need that with my own writing too. So
Mm-hmm.
the faster the pace, the better. I mean, I love reading slow burn books, and I love reading atmospheric books like Ramsey Campbell.
Yeah.
I'm currently reading Golotok by Andrew. I'm going to say his surname wrong here, so apologies, Andrew, if I get it wrong. But Neiberg.
Oh, I know who you mean.
I,
Yeah, I
yeah,
can't say his surname
and
either. Sorry, Andrew.
sorry, Andrew. And we're Facebook friends, so you'll see this. And Golotok, like, not a lot happens for the first half of the book. There is just a slow creeping dread throughout it all. It's really, really good. I'm really liking it. So that's an easy book to recommend right there.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I'm not averse to slow burn, but I find that when I'm writing, I need something to happen, and I need something to happen now.
Yeah.
And the thing with Exeter Incident, again, I didn't subconsciously go out to do Aliens, but I can definitely see the parallel. But I think with Aliens, you've got that first 40, 45 minutes where, again, not a lot happens. You're just
Mm-hmm.
hanging out with the Marines, laughing at Hicks and Hudson and all of them. Whereas I think with Exeter Incident, what I really wanted to do was just how fast paced can you write a book? Like
Very.
how how quickly can you make events unspool? Which is where the idea for the timestamps came from.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, there'll be people watching this who've not read the book, but they should. Um, and so every chapter is a timestamp, and some of
Mm-hmm.
those timestamps are like within a minute of each other. And I just wanted to get that sense of urgency, I think,
Mm-hmm.
about this situation is pretty shit. And,
Yeah.
and it's only going to get worse. And my other reason uh, was because, you know, disaster response teams and terrorist response teams and all of that kind of thing. Um, you know, there's absolutely no way they sit back and watch this happen, even in Exeter.
Mm-hmm.
So I was chatting to a mate who's one of the armed response officers for Devon, And at the time that I wrote the book, he literally just passed his training for it. So it was, everything that is in the book is absolutely current. I mean, if there's any mistakes, they're mine, not his, obviously. And it turns out there's only 3 armed response vehicles in Devon. And the nearest like armed response helicopters and anti-terrorist units and all of that kind of thing are a helicopter ride away. So my other desire to make things happen really quickly was so that they couldn't respond.
Yeah.
So I didn't have to go down the the research route of spending all my time finding out exactly how people would respond to this situation. If it's too fast for them to respond, then that's great. Gets me out of an author hole, and also hopefully entertains the reader because it happens so fast.
Yeah, I was gonna say I loved the timestamps because it gave this because everything's moving really fast, but then when you like I was like flicking, I was like, wait a minute, does this like a minute after? Or was this 5 minutes? And it gave a bigger feeling of like everything's happening everywhere. It's like there's too much going on all at once. Not too much going on, but you know what I mean, like too much for like you said, people to respond. And that's I loved that detail because a pet peeve. I read and watch a lot of zombie stuff. I love zombies, and a pet peeve that is in 90% of that is there is no way that a global zombie thing would have happened in that scenario. Like, the even armed police could have stopped that or whatever. So
a couple of shots to the head, it's all over.
Yeah, it's yeah, so it's few zombie books have had convincing reasons for why the entire world is now at risk. But I really enjoyed yeah, it just felt like it was just unraveling, like everyone was like, what the like quick and like yeah, by the time the message gets to certain people and then people are like, oh, what are you on about? So yeah, it was cool. And then sorry, I'm just going to jump back to this one. The thing I liked about this one felt quick as well. Quite the page turner, both of them are. And I liked the military aspect in this. You know what? Funnily enough, I didn't think of Dog Soldiers when I was reading it. So I think it probably yeah. So yeah, it doesn't come off as a because we compared it to Dog Soldiers earlier. I just want to let people know this isn't like David hasn't just
they're not stuck in a house in the middle of nowhere. It's a bit more expansive than that.
Yeah, and this had like a big feel to it as well. We've got this nice little sort of isolated story, but there were a lot of what if kind of bigger picture kind of questions in it. And I liked how that you mixed we've got sort of a contemporary setting. It's like set today pretty much, and then but the beginning of it when he falls when he falls into the hole, and it feels very ancient down there. So I really liked the like what's the word I'm looking for, the dichotomy of like the setting and the feel that you use to sort of like blend the legend together.
Yeah, I wrote a prequel for Graham Reynolds. He did an anthology called Leaders of the Pack. And he asked me to write a werewolf story set in my world for that anthology, which is amazing because Graham and Highmore,
yeah,
the guy who wrote Highmore wants me to write something for him. Okay, I can do that. But then after the invite landed, it was then a couple of weeks of real panic of okay, he's assembled a lot of really great writers for this book, like Paul Kane's in it. And it's like, okay, I need to up my game a bit here, but I also I need to make it different so that it will stand out. You don't just want to write a werewolf story where somebody turns up to I don't know, a service station and a werewolf lets rip in the service station, everybody dies. It's lots of blood. It's really entertaining, but nobody would remember it as soon as you close the book. Although I did use that idea in the sequel to Originals Return. So I decided to go all the way back to that cave and like, why was it there? How did it get there? What was it for? And so I kind of went back to Celtic times and Roman times. And so in Leaders of the Pack is a story called The Original, and it's set in Roman times Britain. And it's about a centurion who is going looking for, well, that would kind of be a spoiler, I guess. He's looking for he's looking for things.
He's got
And
stuff
he
to find.
finds them. He's got stuff to find, and it generally doesn't end well for anyone involved. But yeah, so I go into a bit more of the kind of the mythology, I guess, of it back in the prequel. The sequel kind of expands on the idea of the wolves as separate entities a bit more. I literally feeling a little bit guilty that I haven't done much writing recently, and knowing that we were doing this afternoon. This morning, I finished the sixth, seventh draft of the original's Rage. So hopefully that will be out this summer.
Cool. I was going to ask you what you're working on now, and also I was going to ask you typically how many drafts you do, or if you have a typical amount, or if it depends on the book.
I think 6 is pretty typical because at some point you've got to let it go, right? At some point you've got to say, okay, this is as good as I can make it. It's been through various editors. It's been through various sets of eyes, various sets of beta readers. I'm very lucky. My wife is an English graduate,
Cool.
and a friend of mine is like linguistic in his skill set. So they're like my joint first readers and editors all in one go. And my friend Rich reads multiple drafts of all my stories, the poor bugger. And yeah, so basically they give me great notes to work from, and then we go from there. And so the only thing that's left to do for Originals Rage now is the read aloud bit. Just sit in a room by yourself, read it aloud, make sure each sentence flows properly and works as it should. So that'll make that definitely 7 drafts at that point.
You're in Adam Neville territory with your draft numbers there.
Well, I was chatting to Kit Power about it, and I mean, I know you're a big fan of Kit, as we all should be. Everybody should be reading more Kit Power, and in fact, you can start with this one. Oh, that's backwards, isn't it? That's backwards. But that's The Finite, which is tremendous book. And Kit just, as far as I'm aware, I don't think Kit plans at all. He just sits and splurges words onto the page and then edits and carves and edits and carves. And he does many more drafts than that. I mean, obviously it works for him because his stuff is fantastic. I've not read a bad thing that he's written. But I found that as time has gone on, I've kind of moved away a bit from complete pantsing. And I wrote a sci-fi horror book called Memory Shades. And I wrote that over lockdown. So, you have to do something. And that's still sitting on my hard drive because it took a backseat to Originals Rage. But it has just read Memory Shades for me. And his feedback has made me go, oh, yeah, okay, maybe I need to dust this off and do it again because he really enjoyed it. So that's the next project, really. So the summer holidays are coming, thank God. So I will use those to do some promo stuff for Rage, get the cover sorted with a friend of mine, and then start the build up to physical release of that. Hopefully in time for the Birmingham author event that is happening. I don't know if you've seen this.
I think I saw something, yeah.
Yeah, there's a mass there's about 30 of us, I think, going to like a pub in Birmingham, where we're going to do a sort of a mini horror festival, which is all being sorted out by Trish Wilson, which is awesome. And there's lots of great people going. Ben Langley's going, Graham Reynolds is going, Kev Harrison's come over from Portugal, so he's going to be there, which is
really?
great. Yeah, I love Kev. He's a great bloke, and he's got a fabulous beard. So
Yes.
yeah, so it'll be lovely to see him. And there's lots of people there, like Sarah Jules and Lee Kenny, people like that I'll be meeting for the first time. So really looking forward to that. So that's kind of my goal, is to have it ready for them. But my day job just keeps getting in the way, and so whether it'll be ready for them or not is another thing altogether. But either way, it'll be ready for FantasyCon in October. So it'll definitely be out by then.
Yay! Yeah, I really look forward to the tail end of the year when the most of the bookish events start popping up, because I really always look forward to them and actually getting together with everyone.
Yeah, I think FantasyCon is probably my favorite event of the year. And if you go thinking, oh, I'm going to come back from that as a superstar, and everyone's going to know who I am, and my book sales are going to rocket through the roof, you're kind of fundamentally misunderstanding what it's for. Well, in my opinion, anyway. For me, it's about meeting people and just being in a room with those inspirational people. You spend 5 minutes with somebody like CC Adams, and your desire to just immediately go to your room and write is huge, because that's just what he's like. He's a really great bloke, and he's really inspirational, and he gives great hugs. But
I was going to say
that's personal boundaries, obviously. But he's also a great writer. He wrote a werewolf book as well, and
Downwind Alice.
Downwind Alice, yes, thank you. You saved my blushes there. I'd nearly forgotten. Sorry, Cece. And that's a great book as well. That's quite brutal, in the way that CC is quite brutal, really. And people like Phil Sloman, Dave Jeffrey, yourself, great, and Tim Levin always makes me laugh. And did I mention Phil Sloman? I can't remember. But Phil and his legs. Yeah, they're not that great. To be fair, I've seen them because we've shared a flat a few times, and they're not all that.
Oh my god!
He's gonna kill me. Can we edit that bit out?
No, Phil needs to know the truth about how you feel about his legs, David. CC's reminded me, because I've had some. I think the first time I met CC was at ChillaCon, and I was really shy. That was the first a bookish event I ever went to.
I think that's where we met for the first time.
I think that's where I met most people, because I'd never been to anything before, apart from horror cons, but they're a bit different. And he came over, gave me a lovely hug, and then we talked. He was giving me really good advice on all sorts of things. I broke my back a decade ago, and he was giving me advice on what weights to lift to strengthen it and everything. And he's a great, smiley, happy person.
Yes, very much so.
Which leads me on to this. I think that there's probably a misconception about horror and the people that we're.
I know where you're going with this. Yeah.
Scary people, and I find horror fans the same as metalheads. They're the nicest people.
I totally agree. I mean, if you go to a mosh pit at a metal gig, and obviously it's been a while, but you don't get hurt. Nobody gets hurt. It's just great fun. I'm not sure my back, legs, or desire are there anymore, but they're great events, and everybody sees these big leather jackets and tattoos and multiple piercings and everything, and thinks, oh my god, you're really scary. But actually, they're the loveliest guys, loveliest people. And I think horror people are the same. I don't know if it's because we get our anger at the world out on the page, maybe. I don't know.
I don't know what it is, but all I can say is that and obviously there are people you have to watch out for. There are things that happen, so I can't speak for everyone, but I always feel safer in a group of in a horror writers group in person than I do in other social settings. I don't know if that's maybe because we all make friends and you see the same faces at the same things all the time. But I went to FantasyCon last year alone, and I usually travel with Justin Park.
Yeah.
So I'm not used to going to these things like completely by myself. And I was all like nervous when I walked in. I was like, oh, I hope there are some people I know here and I haven't just, signed up for a weekend where I'm going to be by myself.
A weekend alone. Yeah.
The literal first face that I saw as I walked into the hotel was Adam Millard, and he was like, "Oh, hi, come join us." I was there, all angry with my suitcase because I'd got lost. I'd walked quite a long way, but yeah, it was you could always just even if you don't know anyone, people are always just so you could just sit down with people. It like people are just friendly and interested to talk to everyone. So it's and you get to meet heroes. And embarrass yourself as I do.
I am yet to meet Adam Neville, which I've got to tick that off somewhere because he's a fantastic writer. But he's very good friends with Tim Leben, so I'm hoping Tim can sort out an invite at some point. Hint, Tim. Hint, come on, Tim, sort it out. But I remember, I remember the first time I met Tim Leben, and it was at FantasyCon in this weird place in Glasgow.
Mm-hmm.
Like it was in a conference room of a hospital in Glasgow. It was an odd place. And I met Tim there, and I was really like quite shy. Like, oh my God, that's Tim Leben. And he was just like the nicest bloke. He was so down to earth and so no airs and graces about him at all. But this is a guy who's written for Star Wars. He's written in the Aliens world. He's written Predator, but and he is just so humble and nice. Damn him.
Oh,
What a knobhead. And that's I think writing really. I think that's the writing world, because I think writers by their nature are quite introspective and perhaps not great in crowds. So when you meet other people who are just like that, it's like, oh, okay, great. I can be all right now. I'm with people who are not going to judge me if I'm a little bit weird for the next 5 minutes.
Yeah, because we're all kind of the same. It's so funny that those events are full of introverts. But it's very comforting because everyone kind of understands. Like, I remember the first night of FantasyCon, I had a headache, and I'd been out for dinner with Andrew Freudenberg.
Yeah.
And I can't remember the order of the dinners now, but anyway, I was like, I gotta go to my room, and they're like, you coming back? I was like, no. I've talked myself out and I have a headache, and they were like, oh, okay.
We'll see you tomorrow.
Yeah, you can kind of like slink off, and no one can, like, everyone understands the need for space, and it's I just find them. I'm terrible meeting my heroes. Over time, I've become friends with Tim, so now I can laugh at this now. But I really embarrassed myself in front of him the first time, because it was him, Mick Garris, Grady Hendrix, and Paul Kane all in a row. And I thought, oh my God.
I did a panel at Chilicon with Mick and Paul, and it was like, okay.
You feel a bit like, I'm not worthy. And
then
I thought, which one do I start going on to first? I thought, I'll talk to Mick first, because I wanted to talk to him about the Stand miniseries, and all that came out was, the Critters Ball from Critters 2. Like and I went on, and then by the time I embarrassed myself thoroughly with that, I was so excited to talk to them, I was almost crying, and then I just didn't talk to the rest of them at all, because I thought, nah, I've already made Mick Garris uncomfortable. Like, so I'm going to stop there. But then, the rest of them were so nice.
the first time I met Mick was on the panel that I was moderating at Chilicon, and it was about body horror. And Paul Kane was there, and Georgina Bruce was there. And Georgina is fiercely intelligent. Like she's hilarious. She's hilarious. but she also doesn't suffer fools gladly. And she was wearing a badge that said Jim McLeod, which I thought was a nice touch. And so the four of us are up on this stage, and all morning I'd been to a few other panels in the morning, and all of those panels had like 20, 25 people in them tops.
Mm.
So I was quite relaxed, So I went in, I had my pint, and I sat down, so said hello to Paul, because I've met Paul lots of times. So I had a bit of a chat and a catch up with Paul, met Mick Garris, sat down, looked up, it's like 100 people in the room. Like,
yeah, it was cool.
Yes. And now they've come to listen, like, to us talk, and I'm looking at my questions going, oh, fuck, basically. Sorry, shouldn't swear. So my opening gambit was to just turn it into a bit of a giggle and say, okay, we're talking about body horror. So if anybody mentions Clive Barker or John Carpenter for the next hour, we all have a drink.
Mm-hmm.
So big laugh from the audience. And Mick Garris is sitting there, and he's an incredibly healthy Californian dude. He doesn't drink. So he was like, okay, I'll drink my carrot juice whilst you guys get hammered. Happy days. And he proceeded to mention John Carpenter and Clive Barker repeatedly for the next hour. And every time it was like, oh, I wish I hadn't started this. It's like, I'm supposed to be coherent up here, and Mick Garris is reducing me to bumbling drunk. But anyway, it was good fun.
Well, that's just the way it goes. What I have found from I always say my favorite thing about Happy Goat Horror now is getting to do these author interviews, and I love talking to, like, basically this is just an excuse for me to get to talk to all the writers I like.
Thank you.
Yeah, so
I made the cut. Woo!
Yeah, woo! If you're a writer that hasn't been asked yet, by the way, there are a lot of you, so give me time to get through my list. But yeah, I got to speak to obviously lots of indies, and then Adam Neville, Ramsey Campbell, people who've been in traditional publishing as well. And the thing that's nice that I found, because we always get on to talking about these events, like the writer events, and even Adam Neville's like the holy grail for me of writers, but he has writers that he feels that way about. So no matter where you think you kind of are, the people you look up to have other people that make them feel like they're not good enough to be writing, and it's just I don't know, it's a nice community to be in, and there is such a lack of competitiveness, I find.
There's no ego.
I
think if you rocked up with an ego, you'd be put in your place fairly quickly, because people would be like, oh yeah, well, I'm not bothering you,
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's great. But I don't know, other writers are not my competition. I mean, I can see your bookshelf behind there. I can see there's a lot of Tim Levin there, Katie, to be honest.
Wow.
But Tim Levin isn't the only person you're going to read for the rest of your life, So other writers are not my competition. And if I ever get to the point where it's like, well, while you're reading him, you should be reading me, then, shoot me, put me out my misery, because it's ridiculous. And, if somebody goes and buys, I don't know, your book, and I was going to plug this later. This is fantastic, by the way, people. Fantastic. But that's from Black Shook, and Steve Shaw does such a great job with all of his books that if somebody reads that, then they might go on and read Kit's book, or they might go on and read Dave Jeffrey or Phil or Cece, and then eventually they might make their way to me, because we're all in each other's acknowledgements, basically. So the fact that somebody like Phil Sloman puts me in the acknowledgements of his short story collection is incredibly humbling, because his command of people and character is just amazing. His ability to make you sympathetic for people who are not necessarily sympathetic is fantastic. And I've kind of lost my thread now, but yeah, Phil Sloman, read him. So yeah, if people read that and then they find me, that's great. If they read me and from me they find Kit, that's great. Or if they find Cece, that's great. So I don't really see how somebody reading Cece's latest book is a problem for me.
Yeah.
It can only be a good thing.
Yeah. Well, reader. I mean, I'm quite the avid reader, and I can never.
No, 63 books in a month, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think I broke my brain with. I don't think that was wise, but I had a good time. But yeah, there can never be too many authors. I can never be like, no, I've discovered all the authors I want to read now. That's my limit. And indie horror is where I really started branching out from just reading like Stephen King, for example.
Yeah.
Like I just had a few writers that I was just reading, and I thought, well, what else is out there? And then I have Justin Park to thank for, because I didn't. This is going to sound so stupid. I didn't know about the indie book community until like 10 years ago, and I was writing, and I was like, well, I don't have an agent, and I don't know how this goes. So like, wait, how do you get stuff published? So I started googling, and I was like, oh, small presses. I didn't know those existed. Then I started reading a lot of indie authors because I went down a rabbit hole. I still have books that I bought a decade ago that I haven't got around to reading yet. I had quite the binge, but yeah, no, it's good. Do you find with like indie publishing, there's more scope for the type of stuff that will get published?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, if you take a small press, you know, small press is not a dirty word. Being published by a small press is not, it's not an insult. It's not, you're somehow slumming it. I think there's some prejudice towards self-publishing still, which we frankly we need to get rid of. But if you're published by a small press, it's gone through a rigorous process to get that book. It's not just you writing random words on a page and then hitting publish on KDP on a thing. People have read it. Now, if you take somebody like Steve Shaw again, he'll have read it and will have made a judgment as to whether he wants his name attached to that or not. And that's quite important. Exit Incident came out from D&T Publishing, Dawn O'Shea in the States, and the fact that she liked it and wanted it, that's great. That's great validation for me.
Yeah.
So I think small presses are more likely to take a chance and are also more likely to take a risk. Have you read Chris Kelso?
Yeah.
Or was it Keslow? I can never remember. The Dregs trilogy. I'm not sure. And sorry, Chris, that's appalling. The Dregs trilogy, which I'll be fully honest with you, it wasn't for me. But I can really admire what he was trying to do with that. And the writing in it is just beautiful. It's, the subject matter is absolutely depraved.
Yeah.
But it's beautifully written. His book, I Dream of Mirrors, which was put out by Sinister Horror Company, is brilliant. And it's only 100 pages long, but it is amazing. And his ability to craft images and pull a story together from all these seemingly disparate threads is incredible. And I'm not sure that Waterstones are ever going to go, yes, we'll take 10 of those for our front table. It's not going to happen because it's too out there. But there is definitely a market for that, and there is definitely a call for that, and there's definitely people who want to read that. And I think small presses provide that, and they provide a really vital service to readers in that, I'm a long time Stephen King fan. But I don't want to read Stephen King anymore. I want to read Kit. I want to read Cece. I want to read more books like that, books that maybe take a bit of a chance and aren't 6,000 pages long when they could have been 300. Fairy tale, I'm looking at you. So sorry. That was a bit naughty of me. But
I wasn't a huge fan of fairy tale myself, I have to say, but Stephen King in general, yes.
yeah, definitely. 11, 22, 63. Absolutely fantastic book, So, yeah, small presses do a great job of getting more edgy niche stuff out in front of people's eyes, where if you put it out yourself, it might just disappear. And
Yeah.
for that, we should all be grateful.
Yeah, and novellas and short story collections as well.
Yeah.
There's a thing in mainstream publishing, apparently, where they just don't tend to take novellas and short story collections because apparently people don't read them. And I was like,
well, that's nonsense, isn't it? It's nonsense.
Yeah, it is nonsense. I don't know if it's because maybe it's more profitable to market, not because they could charge more for a novel. But then, if you get a 300-page short story collection, surely that's the same. I don't know, but yeah, I'm always confused by things like that, like the length of the book apparently makes a big difference to a mainstream publisher. But then they'll market Stephen King's Elevation as a novel. The cheek of that, honestly, David. When I pre-ordered that, and when it arrived, I was like, I've got no problems with a novella, but it's just that they charged novel price and said it was a novel. So
wait, if you ever see the Kindle prices on all of those things as well, it's ridiculous. It's like $10.99 for a Kindle edition. You're like, that's a file. But you're like, that's not even physically mine. It's nonsense. Nonsense publishing.
I learned that with academic books I went through when I was still in uni. I used to just buy a lot of academia for fun because I'm a nerd. And
that cool?
Yes, I really enjoy academic studies of, the history of zombie cinema and that kind of stuff. And academic books are unbelievably expensive, and I think it's because the market is very, very small. Because they're usually for studies and things. And I thought, I'll get the ebooks instead. They're exactly the same price.
Yeah.
It's
shit. Nuts, isn't it? Nuts. Absolutely nuts. Now, I know you've got other costs to claw back if you're the publisher, like the editing costs, the cover costs, and so on.
Yeah.
But come on. It's a file,
Yeah.
Seriously.
There should be a difference between an ebook price and a physical copy, I think. But there's surely a more fair way to do that than exactly the same or like nothing. Do you have stuff up on KU? Do you use Kindle Unlimited?
All of it is, I think.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I don't know that much about KU. Do you I don't know how it works for the author then.
So you get paid per page read.
Oh, okay.
So if you and feel free to do this, everybody who's watching this, please go and get one of my books at Kindle Unlimited and just scroll to the end. It works out to be something like 0.5 cent per page. So if you read the whole thing, the difference in pay between if you bought the Kindle book and read it on Kindle Unlimited is not dissimilar for the length of my books. Now that might be different if your books are shorter or longer, but for me it works out to be roughly the same. And I'm not exactly minted from writing, but yeah. But I get a steady income from KU. That's it's beer money, but it's nice beer money.
Yeah.
It's a night out. It's not a pint. So we just leave it at that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Have you forgive me for not already knowing this, have you co-written with anyone?
No.
Is that something you'd be interested in?
I don't know. Dave Jaffrey mentioned it at Chilicon because we'd had a few beers, and I am quite lazy, but I'm mega busy with work. So if I'm only writing for me and my own timescale, then it's okay if I have a month off, 2 months off, whatever. But if I'm if you're waiting for me to turn in the next chapter so you can do your bit, then I'm putting pressure on myself because I don't want to let you down or whoever else. So right now, it's a no. But my plan is to retire in 2 years. And at that point, I might have more time to devote to doing some joint stuff together. So yeah, I'm not averse to it at all. Just not yet.
Yeah, I haven't co-written with anyone because I just can't figure out how it would. I'm a bit control freaky, so I don't know if I'd be a bit like have my editor hat on if I'm writing with something like about their stuff. So I've just avoided it so far. Yeah, it's cool. Do you have favorite indie writers that you'd like to recommend besides your own work, of course?
Well, that's a bit crass anyway, isn't it? Yeah, there's this guy called David Watkins. He's really good. You should check him out.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I think I've mentioned a lot of them already. CC Adams, Phil Sloman, Dave Jeffrey. Dave Jeffrey's a force of nature. You know,
he's amazing.
His work in promoing other people is quite incredible. And yeah, he's written one of the best dystopian series out there in the A Quiet Apocalypse series. And I was just looking at my shelves before I started this. I don't own any physical Dave Jeffrey books, which is shocking. So I'm definitely going to buy the Quiet Apocalypse omnibus as soon as it's out. Graham Reynolds with Dark and Lonely Water. I read a pre-release version of that from him. I don't think he made many changes between what I fed back and what he put out because it was great. It was really, really good. Kev Harrison's awesome. Dan Howarth is a great writer. I think he's trying to do screenplays at the moment, but he needs to get a novel out because I think people would really love what he's doing. Kev has just released a novel that I'm hoping to get from him in the summer. Who else? You, with your short stories. The end, that's brilliant. And the first time I became aware of you actually was when Justin did the Sinister Horror Writers reading short stories over COVID.
Oh, well, during COVID. Oh yeah, that was fun.
Yeah. And I listened to your story and I thought it was wonderful.
Oh, thank
you. Kit Power is incredible. It depends what you want because Kit can do it all. You know, if you want uber violence, then probably Boiling Point. If you want fast with mega dark humor, and then A Song for the End.
Yeah.
But you know, Song for the End is incredible because basically, for anyone who doesn't know, a band records a song that compels people to tell the truth. And he really runs with that as a concept. I think my favorite bit is when the dad explodes in the queue for the football stadium.
Yeah.
When his son says, "Are we going to win the league this year, Dad?"
Yeah.
And his dad says yes, and then blows up. But that's an example of what Kit does really, really well. You know, he takes a concept and then he absolutely runs with it, and you have a great time whilst you're reading the book. And the book is, I need to get this right because the book is almost popcorn film-esque in that it's so easy to read. And like you read it in 1-2 sessions and it's done. And then you put it down and you go, that was great. Now I need to read something a bit deeper like Ramsey Campbell. And then 3 days later, you're still thinking about Kit's book.
Yeah.
And that's amazing. You know, how he does that is incredible, you know. And if you want bleak, I don't think I've read much bleaker than The Finite, to be honest.
It's a bit of a tearjerker, that one.
The end of that was like, you know.
How dare you, Kit?
Yeah. And again, he's such a nice guy. How does he do that? You know,
that's the funny thing about him. He's like the nicest person on the planet, and then he writes like such savage stuff.
Yeah. So Kit would be incredible. And the other one we've talked about werewolf books several times over this. We haven't mentioned Mad Dog by Justin Park.
God. So good.
Now, I imagine that is currently out of print.
Yeah.
But I really hope that he either puts it out just by himself, just via Kindle or whatever, because that is hands down my favorite werewolf book.
It's really good.
It's really, really good. And the way it's written, the way it unfolds, the way you think, oh, I've got this figured out. I know what's going on here. And then, no, you haven't.
You
yeah, I haven't got a clue, And he did the same thing with Punch. Punch was really good as well.
Oh.
So I like Justin a lot as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, and then I could go on. And there's probably somebody that I spend a lot of time with sitting there now going, bastard, he didn't mention me.
Well,
Ben Langley. Ben Langley. There you go.
Well, let me circle round to my recommendation of David Watkins here, who I think is the perfect author if you enjoy like fast-paced, like action-packed horror, and you're also very, very good with characters, Dave. I love. I get very attached to them, and
a lot of them are based on real people. Some of them I can never tell. But I wrote a novella called Saint Neath.
Yeah.
And that was
inspired. That in my pile. But I have it here.
That was inspired by a kid I used to teach, who came out, is that the right expression, as trans over lockdown. So went into lockdown as a girl and came out of lockdown wanting to be known as a boy. Well, I'm not going to dead name him now, but Adrian, you inspired that story, and the kick-ass scary spider on the front of it.
I cannot believe
that's Adrian Baldwin's fault. That
I cannot believe it's on my shelf in my Dave Watkins selection. I can't believe that I forgot to put it here because Saint Neath. I read that and I was like, oh, because I am an arachnophobe.
Like, so am I. I can't stand them. Even little tiny mini spiders. No, you got more limbs than me. Fuck off.
And I read a review of that said something like, this is sort of like a great book if you're someone who likes eight-legged freaks. And I was like, no, eight-legged freaks wasn't scary. Like the spiders were squealing. It's like that. It is not in eight-legged freaks territory for me, that book at all. I was like you're very good at setting a scene. So when they walking through the woods and the webs and stuff, I was like, oh no. And obviously I knew it was spiders because there's a spider on the cover, but it was
I did worry about that when Adrian and Dean Jinkle, the publisher, when they sent me the cover. I love that cover. Like Adrian really did such a good job. It's such a great cover. I couldn't say no to it. And also, you figure out fairly quickly that it's spiders, right? So it's not really a spoiler, is it?
No, it's because it's a shorter story. It's a Domain Publishing, that one, wasn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's about 15,000 words, something like that.
Yeah, I really like covers. They're good books to collect. For novellas.
Yeah. I mean, with that one, once I'd decided that the main character was going to be trans, I then very stupidly, because no one else knows that he's trans, so I then decided to set myself the challenge of writing the book without any female pronouns, which turns out to be really hard.
Yeah.
when you're talking about somebody who nobody knows is trans, and so they all think he's still a girl and wants to be identified as a girl, and he doesn't. So, and I wanted to hint at that all the way through, so I didn't put any female pronouns in it. Man, that was hard. I'm never doing that again.
Yeah, it was. I thought it worked though.
Thank you.
Because I thought that probably quite accurately mirrored the and I obviously I'm not trans, so I can't, like, I could be talking crap, but I would imagine that there's a lot of like confusion in the experience, especially around like your pronouns. If you're if everyone else is identifying you as one thing and you feel completely different, I thought you handled that character with like a lot of respect, and
thank you.
It was I really liked that aspect of it, because we still need to do a lot better with representation.
Yeah, definitely. I you know, I'm a middle-aged white guy, so you know, if I get it wrong, that's horrible. You know, that's not helping anyone. So you got to do your best to get it right. You know, and you've got to be massively respectful. And so Adrian, bless him, read the story because I was not going to publish it without his approval.
Oh,
And he came back and loved it. And he particularly loved the bit where they hold hands at the end.
Yeah,
It was
it was
like, right,
so
okay.
sweet.
So,
I love that.
okay, there you go. There's my last line sorted, you know. But it was his suggestion about the dead naming and things like that. You know, these are all phrases that when I wrote that story weren't really in common parlance, I guess. And they are more so now. But yeah, I just wanted to make sure I got it right, you know.
Yeah,
You don't want to offend anyone.
It's good to run it by someone that's of the demographic.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. I do read. I think I read. Obviously, I read a lot of review requests, and then I read quite widely in horror, at least, not outside of the genre, admittedly. But I read a lot of what I would consider like well-intentioned misses, where someone has made an effort, but they've kind of like messed it up. But I think that people will make allowances if they know that, if they can see that some research was done and the heart was in the right place, but it's just gone a bit tits up to, like you said. But I get a bit nervous about writing in a like writing from a perspective that's not my own, except for if I'm writing grumpy middle-aged men. I don't know why. I read, like, that's my favorite. It's my favorite.
I'll be to read that for you, Kaylee. I've got that demographic nailed.
I've done it so much. I think probably most of my stories are from that perspective for some reason, and I think it's because I've got some great middle-aged men in my life that I find really funny, and I think that's what happened. I sit down and I'm like, oh, and then I'm like, oh wait, I think I might have accidentally written someone I know into that character. But there's just a lot of comedy to be found from the grumpy middle-aged that I'm
there are indeed
swiftly heading towards that age bracket myself, so I need to be more careful. But
I passed it over COVID.
So. Well, you're not grumpy.
I can be. I'll bow to my wife on that one. She'll tell you more accurately than I will.
I have a very important final question for you.
Go for it.
You might know what it is. Do you know what this is?
Do you know what? I saw you do that with Dave Jeffrey, and I meant to Google it so I could answer, and I have no clue.
It's well, if you'd Googled it. Sorry, my husband was sneaking in to hand me a cup of tea. Did you see the stealth?
Good man.
What a great man.
Yeah. He's a keeper.
He is. Googled it, I would have been mad because that's cheating, Dave. But okay, well, I'll tell you when we stop recording. I can't tell you as on the recording because otherwise people will know and the game will be over. But I am offering a prize for anyone who knows what that is. It's an oddity from my childhood that no one in the world, one other person knows where it is that I've met, but but no
one. Is it
a
Welsh thing then? Because it might have been from when we were. No, okay.
It's this is from the 80s, and if you look at it, you could probably tell that it's from the 80s. But yeah, no, this has become a running thing now. I think I brought this up on my second ever interview, and it was like just for a silly joke, but then it became a thing. So, once again, everyone, if you know, put it in the comments. There are prizes to be had. Okay, cool. I think I have grilled you sufficiently for today.
Lovely. That was a very fast hour.
Yes, and maybe when you have your next release, maybe we can I can get you back and we can do like a little chat about it or something.
I would love that. That'd be great.
All right. Well, if you stay there, Dave, I'll explain that to you. But for everyone else, we're going to say goodbye and bleed.